Good morning, y'all. Josh's Severe Weather. I'm going to talk about the tropics, which are heating up, but a lot of this video, the second half, will be focused on what's going to be a dangerous threat of more severe weather across portions of the Midwest into the eastern United States, and perhaps multiple mesoscale convective systems, maybe a derecho here and extreme heat. This is going to be a very dangerous setup for a lot of us here over the next couple of days. And I'm going to break that down for you in the second half of this video. Let me share my screen with you and show you kind of a simulated satellite here. Multiple complexes moving across the upper Midwest are going to take aim at the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic states, and additional storms in the forecast as we get to the weekend back across the Central Plains, tracking into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. These storms are going to pack a lot of punch. They're riding over an extreme heat ridge where we're seeing triple-digit heat today and continuing into parts of the weekend over the center of the country. A lot of storm fuel in place, some wind energy in place here for us to see lots of folks getting hit hard. And that is certainly going to be what I'm going to focus the second part of this video on. First, we're going to take a quick look at the Atlantic, and we do have a disturbance which will become an invest and more than likely a tropical depression by the time it moves north and east of the islands. Right now, it does not look like it's going to threaten the Leeward Islands. It may be somewhat of a threat towards Bermuda, but we've still got about a week before that could be an issue. And water temperatures are very warm. Now, with this being an El Nino, we may see this system struggle a little bit due to wind shear and kind of get into the central and northern Atlantic before it really becomes a threat. So that is, I guess, some good news for those of you keeping score at home, and certainly something we're going to have to watch up here across Newfoundland and the northern Atlantic. Now, in the shorter term, we're not expecting immediate development, still some dry air, but you can notice here that the amount of deep blacks is starting to shrink versus what I've showed you the last couple of days. So we're getting more moisture and a little bit more lift in place here. Now all we've got to do is get the wind shear to start to lessen, but the Gulf is still quiet. We do have a disturbance off the southeast coast and a disturbance moving into Central America. That was the one that some models showed becoming a tropical storm this time last week that did not pan out. I think it will happen by the time it moves into the Pacific. But a little bit too late here for the Atlantic. Here's our area of concern, upper level trough spinning across Florida, lots of rain over South Florida. I did talk about that in yesterday's video. We've seen some flooding in the Miami area due to just a copious amount of tropical moisture, and that is going to spread northward towards Georgia and South Carolina. It's unlikely to develop into any kind of tropical system, but some of the rain will be pretty heavy for some locations here near the coast. Then you see a big region of high pressure that's in place here over the western Atlantic. That is protecting the East Coast for the time being. We do have an upper level low over the central Atlantic. This is Bermuda over here, but no immediate threats behind it. Now in the Caribbean, very quiet over the eastern two-thirds, busier though over the western. This is probably not going to become a depression, but as it moves into the Pacific, conditions look a little bit more favorable for a tropical depression or storm to form somewhere here south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec and south of the Riviera. And that would be, I guess, the D storm in the Pacific. Upper level lows south of Texas, lots of heat over the Gulf Coast. We will see some flare-ups over Mexico, but this does not look like a map that shows anything really threatening. Now, the Atlantic monsoon trough is picking up. We're shifting phases in the Madden-Julian oscillation, allowing some more lift to develop here. And this is the area of greatest concern. Let me pull up my cursor to show you guys. And it's right in here. And right now, still a fair amount of wind shear coming around this upper level low. So that is going to kind of hamper any kind of significant development. But as this storm system moves past this shear and up into this region, models do show that development will occur, and that's probably going to start Sunday or Monday of next week. So that's what we're going to be watching here. The next name on the list is Emily, and there is some development with that. Behind this wave, pretty quiet. We'll have more waves coming off of Africa over the weekend and next week that we will have to keep an eye on for development. The European ensembles do show that this system will potentially become a tropical storm by Monday or Tuesday. And at this point, you can see it's well north and east of the islands and tracking east of Bermuda even. So a big shift from what the models showed here just 5 days ago, where it had kind of the southeast on alert. But because of a shift in the upper level ridge and a trough coming down, this is going to recurve even faster. Pretty classic El Nino, honestly, to see a recurve all the way out here, but could become a decent sized storm by the time it gets into the northern Atlantic east of Newfoundland, in the same area where Dawn became a hurricane on Saturday night. We could see this become a hurricane Perhaps by the time we get into, I would say, next Thursday, the 3rd of August, there are some ensembles showing about a 10% chance we could have a hurricane. So this may be our strongest storm yet of the season, but right now not looking like any kind of big threat to land like it did a few days ago. And you can see this massive trough. That's the one bringing the severe weather into the northern U.S. here this week. That is going to shift east into eastern Canada. And what it's going to do is break down the high pressure ridge and steer what I think will be Emily along it and to the east of it and turn it and recurve it up to the east of Atlantic Canada, very close to where Dawn tracked here over Sunday and Monday. So we may see kind of a repeat track at this point. And then the remains are going to head up to the north of Ireland, maybe affecting Scotland and Iceland here next weekend. Beyond that, high pressure builds right back in, and this will be something we have to keep an eye on. We're going to have to watch the central Atlantic to see if a trough gets going here. We're going to have to watch the east coast or the west coast of Africa, as anything sneaks under here is going to have kind of two potential tracks, one into the Caribbean, the other up towards this weakness. But with this high pressure region building right back into the southeast here after next weekend, it does not look like the East Coast has anything to be super worried about for the time being, unlike what it looked like a few days ago. So things do change here in the longer range. I don't think that's new to anybody who understands how the weather works. Certainly, we do our best to forecast it, but we know things are going to change. But here is the GFS showing a tropical depression becoming a storm probably next Monday, and then tracking well east of Bermuda and strengthening by the time it gets there Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then probably at its strongest in the same place where Dawn became a hurricane, right up here around 40 north and 50 west. So no threat to land, fish hurricane potentially, and then tracking into the British Isles and becoming a problem the following weekend. After that, high pressure builds in. We don't see anything really developing at this point, but we are going to have to keep an eye on these systems coming off of Africa as they track in this direction. So still kind of early in the game here with tropical season. The end of July, beginning of August, we start to see some uptick, but really things don't start cranking until about the middle, maybe the third week of August. So this can still turn into a very active season. The waters are very warm, and obviously we've already had 4 storms, really 5 storms if you include the January one. We may have number 6 here next week, and that is pretty active. The average season has 12 to 13 storms. We'll be halfway there before we get to August potentially. So that is very active. So even though nothing's really been a big threat, doesn't mean down the road that may not be the case. And those of you in Florida remember that from Ian last September. We were very quiet on the state side of things, and then we had a Category 5 hurricane that hit as a strong 4 in Florida late in September. So it only takes one storm, and I don't want to belittle anybody when I say that, but really that is the truth. The Canadian model also shows the same development that the GFS does. It has a weaker system up until about Wednesday, and then strengthens the system into a deepening tropical storm and possibly approaching hurricane strength here next Thursday, and then moving away and impacting the British Isles next weekend. The ensembles on the GFS, none of them goes west of Bermuda anymore. None of them even hits the islands. Everything is over the central and northern Atlantic. Great news. We do have another system that some of the ensembles are trying to develop here, but they kill it off for the most part. Maybe a very weak system heading towards the Caribbean next weekend. So great news here. Now, not great news in China right now. We have just a really disastrous situation in the making here with our typhoon here. This is Doksuri, and it did escape just to the west of Taiwan, but did make landfall near Quanzhou, which is a very heavily populated area. You can see from Zoom Earth, the storm made a very nasty impact on northern Luzon in the Philippines, then turned into the strait here, went west of Taiwan, and made landfall in China here earlier in the day today. Winds near Luzon were up to 150 miles per hour right in here. So it was approaching Category 5 typhoon intensity. And then some dry air did get into the circulation. Fortunately, it weakened a little bit to a Category 3 north of the Philippines. So it could have been a lot worse. And then we saw some re-strengthening from 2 back to 3 here yesterday, west of Taiwan, then weakening back to Category 2. And now we're looking at a huge rainmaker for eastern and southeastern China. Unfortunately, China may get hit again here next week, and other places as well, including Iwo Jima, or not Iwo Jima, I'm sorry, Okinawa, including Naha. And this is our next tropical storm. Falcon is a Philippine name, and Kanun is the Western Asian Pacific name, but likely to see strengthening as it moves into the Philippine Sea this weekend. and perhaps a strong or very strong typhoon category 3 here by Monday, making landfall, it looks like Monday night, near or just to the west here of Naha, which is in Japan, in Okinawa, which is where my brother is going to be set to fly next Tuesday. So pray for him, please. But this could be very bad. It could be a category 3, even category 4 typhoon moving across the eastern China Sea or East China Sea. And then right now, landfall is expected near Shanghai. This is actually putting Shanghai in a very vulnerable spot with potentially typhoon conditions in an area where I believe 15 million people reside. This could be a super bad situation, but this could still change as well, and they could get spared. Right now, though, you can see a disorganized system, but it is holding on to tropical storm strength and expected to strengthen to about 950 to 960 millibars. So not quite as strong as Doksuri, but still up there. And it may be at its strongest when it is hitting Okinawa here next week, next Monday night into Tuesday morning, and then turning towards Shanghai. The GFS ensembles are making more of a right turn into the Yellow Sea and recurving through eastern, northeast China and North Korea. However, the European makes that recurve much later and has the landfall south of Shanghai. So averaging the two together, that's where that forecast track takes it right into Shanghai. But again, this is 5 days away, and there will certainly be some adjusting in the final track, which you can see it's deepening steadily this weekend and continuing to deepen until about Monday, and then making landfall near Shanghai here on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, China time, and then slowly weakening just inland, becoming a very heavy rain threat for much of central and eastern China, and then turning northeast towards North Korea and northeastern China. All right, so now we're going to focus on the U.S., and the extreme heat we're dealing with, triple digits from Kansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota into Illinois and Indiana today. Very nasty heat. Make sure you are properly hydrating. Hot in other areas as well. Also triple digit heat indices from Eastern Virginia up into New Jersey. This area has not seen really nasty heat. We did have some hot days around the 4th of July, but it is going to be blazing hot here. And on the top of this heat ridge, we are looking at more severe weather. Yesterday was pretty bad across New England and parts of the Northeast. We did have at least 1 or 2 tornadoes reported. I know in New Hampshire, there was a reported tornado near Keene, and a lot of wind damage across southern Mass, Connecticut, upstate New York, eastern PA, and even down to northern Virginia when you get over towards Dulles and towards Loudoun County. We saw also severe weather overnight across eastern Minnesota, moving into the North Country here of Wisconsin and the UP. And that is now tracking south and eastward into the Lake Michigan region. You can see this nasty complex of storms tracking across northern Illinois, impacting the Chicagoland area. That is going to continue to intensify as it crosses Lake Michigan and heads into the eastern lakes here later today and tonight. There's another complex behind it that will probably do the same thing, and the models are even showing a third one. So this is potentially going to be close to derecho strength here, moving through the region here today into tonight. The next one actually could be worse, and that is going to head into the mid-Atlantic and Northeast region here over the weekend. We have an enhanced risk for severe weather, not really a big tornado threat, but a big wind threat here and potentially significant wind gusts. I think we could see a hatched area in here. 30% chance from Sioux Falls over to Chicago here today into tonight. 15% chance all the way towards northwestern PA, across lower Michigan, all the way down to Interstate 70, Columbus, Indianapolis, Springfield, Missouri, and to near Lincoln, Nebraska. So a big area is going to get hit hard, and very large hail starting out with our next complex here in the Missouri Valley around Sioux Falls and Sioux City. So that is going to continue on to the east tomorrow with a slight risk for severe weather across West Virginia, Western and Northern Virginia, the Delmarva, Philly, New Jersey, New York City, and Southern New England. And I could see how this area gets increased and covers more of Southern Illinois, Eastern Missouri, and much of Kentucky here, depending on how things develop. The models are in somewhat of a disagreement. I will show you the HRRR model, which does look pretty nasty, and behind it another complex which is forming in the Dakotas, and that is going to be impacting this area on Sunday. We do have 2% chances for tornadoes over the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, as well as over eastern Wyoming. A bigger chance for severe wind in both regions, and a big chance for hail as well in this next complex in the plains. During the day Sunday, marginal risk, but I think we could see a slight risk across parts of the Tennessee Valley and the Ozarks region here, and maybe a marginal risk extending into Western Virginia, North Carolina, and upstate South Carolina on Saturday. We're going to keep an eye on that. And then another area to watch. So this pattern just repeats itself. Now, it will quiet down in the Northeast and Great Lakes with cooler weather coming down on Sunday, but we are still going to have active weather. This is a look at our storm complex, and you can see severe winds starting off here in Wisconsin this afternoon and moving quickly down through the Lake Michigan region and into Ohio. You can see kind of our maximum wind gust map. I'm going to zoom in on this for a minute so you can see it. And then here's our next one that tracks through Nebraska and northern Minnesota, Missouri, and then towards Louisville, Kentucky here tomorrow afternoon, and then may make its way all the way into western North Carolina here tomorrow evening. And then another one with severe wind may develop across the Ozarks, downstate Illinois, and track into Kentucky and Tennessee. So 3 potentially severe ongoing outbreaks. This one has the best chance of becoming a derecho. That's the one that's going to form in Nebraska here later on. I will zoom in for you guys to kind of see a better view of this here, and I'll zoom out and zoom back in. But here's the first one moving through Chicagoland here this afternoon into tonight. Here's the next one moving out of Nebraska overnight and into Missouri and Illinois tomorrow morning, then into Indiana and Kentucky tomorrow afternoon, and then another one over southeast Missouri, southern Illinois, maybe 80-mile-per-hour winds potentially over southeast Illinois, and that will track down through the Tennessee Valley and Kentucky tomorrow night. Let me shift this back over a little bit so you guys can see. Whoops, that was the one I had just now. All right, wrong Columbia River, sorry. Let's take a look here at the Central Plains, and I'm sorry for jumping around on you guys here. It's just a lot to talk about, as you could probably understand. Here's what we're going to do. States, and we're going to do Nebraska here. Beautiful. All right, and back across Wyoming and Nebraska, you see this storm complex starts here around 7, 8 o'clock this evening in northeast Colorado and quickly advances into lower parts of Nebraska. And that's going to head into Missouri here around daybreak tomorrow, and then into Illinois around lunchtime, and then another system dropping down into Tennessee. And let me see if I can get you Arkansas up here. Yep. And then that is perhaps going to survive all the way into the Memphis area here later tomorrow evening. In the Mid-Atlantic region, we are also going to see some potentially severe weather here. Not so much today. We could have a few stronger storms, though, in the DC region late in the afternoon. But tomorrow, moving into western PA, northern West Virginia early in the day, and then tracking farther to the south and east, where we could have some severe weather here tomorrow late in the day over the Mid-Atlantic region, over the lower parts of the New England, the Northeast, and even parts of northwestern North Carolina. A ton of CAPE. This is storm fuel in place here on the HRRR. You can see surface-based CAPE with all the heat we're getting meeting up with our front. Amounts are going to get up to maybe as high as 5,000 joules per kilogram, and that is pretty high. But definitely with this kind of CAPE, we have the ingredients in place where we could see a derecho forming and tracking across this entire region here over the next 24 to 36 hours. The HRRR model shows on satellite, here's our first system, which is moving down through the Great Lakes here and into the Ohio Valley. Here's our next one moving out of Nebraska overnight and into the lower lakes and the Ohio Valley here tomorrow afternoon, and then down into parts of Kentucky beyond that. And here's a look at the composite radar, and you can see some severe weather this morning across Illinois, additional storms over Wisconsin later this afternoon, some supercells possible here, very large hail, maybe a tornado, and destructive wind around 6, 7 o'clock. This is all going to advance south and east pretty quickly here overnight tonight, so be sure to be on the lookout for warnings in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois here tonight. The next one moves out of Missouri and into parts of central and southern Illinois and Indiana tomorrow towards the middle of the day, and then into the afternoon heading into Kentucky. And I'm going to shift here so you can see these states side by side here. This is this morning. Things are going to quiet down a little bit, then more storms between Stevens Point and Madison here this afternoon around the Dells and Rapids. And then moving towards the lake here. Additional storms later today. We could see very intense wind across this region, a lot of rotation as well, so a tornado or two is possible. 6, 7, 8 o'clock tonight across the southern half of Wisconsin, then quieting down overnight. and then cooler weather is going to return here behind our front tomorrow. Farther south and east, we did have some warnings early in the day here in northern Illinois. These are going to quiet down quite a bit here. And then we'll see more storms developing late this afternoon in Illinois, Indiana, and western Ohio. And then Chicagoland could get hit hard here between 7 and 10 o'clock tonight with additional heavy rain overnight. There could be some urban flooding. And then these storms are going to race quickly south and east across Indiana and Ohio. And this isn't even what I think is the derecho. That's the next one. And we'll see if the HRRR is right and this is a little bit weaker or it holds together. But southern Illinois, southern Indiana, and Kentucky could get hit pretty hard here tomorrow. You can see in Iowa, we're going to see things moving into the region here late and overnight, southwestern Ohio or southwestern Iowa and around Omaha towards daybreak, and then very quickly racing across. More storms are going to pop up here later tomorrow in the afternoon, but they shouldn't be severe at that point. Here's the leading edge of the first complex moving into Ohio here this afternoon. And we could see a few really nasty storms with destructive wind and hail towards the late afternoon, 7, 8 o'clock, really evening. And then a very stormy evening across much of the state of Ohio, additional heavy rain and maybe some flooding overnight tonight. And then this will move out by tomorrow morning, and we'll see more storms clipping the Cincinnati region after that, but more aimed at Kentucky at that point. I'll come back to Kentucky, but here's the Northeast. We are looking, that was yesterday's model here. Let me fix that for you guys. We are looking at quieter weather today in the Northeast, but maybe some severe weather moving across the St. Lawrence Valley into northern Maine here about 4 or 5 o'clock. So keep an eye on that. We'll also have storms moving into western PA and popping up in Maryland here towards evening. But tomorrow we're likely going to see more destruction here, a lot like yesterday it looks like, over New England, and southern New England could get hit by a few tornadoes during the 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock time frame tomorrow. Same goes for eastern PA and New Jersey. That threat continues a little bit later towards the evening, and then Sunday looks a lot better. It'll be cooling down. Now, the next complex we're watching in Missouri definitely looks potentially concerning here. It's going to move in overnight around 6 or 7 o'clock in northern Missouri, and then track into the east and southeast towards St. Louis tomorrow afternoon. St. Louis is going to have triple-digit heat, so we could see a lot of storm fuel in place for this line of storms, and we may see some destruction in that area right down I-44 around 4 or 5 o'clock. And then once that moves out, we are going to see quieter weather for the second half of the weekend. It doesn't stop in Missouri, though. We're going to see that moving through Illinois and Indiana. You can see here, first complex kind of brushes West Virginia and southern Ohio. Next one moves in overnight in northern Kentucky. And then the bigger one that we're more concerned with is going to move in from the north and west here towards the evening. That'll be preceded by heavy storms over eastern Kentucky, shifting into southwest Virginia, and then also into West Virginia, into the Canaan and Kanawha valleys here, it looks like. But we will see these storms slowly weakening, but may hold their own here Sunday into eastern Tennessee and that region. Showed you all the Northeast. Here's the Mid-Atlantic. Here's a zoomed out view of everything. And just a really nasty pattern here. Lots of heat the next 2 days, and then lots of nasty storms. West Virginia and Western Maryland could get hit hard, not once, but twice here, it looks like, over the next 48 hours. And then this will shift into the Carolinas here late in the day tomorrow, with Sunday being the stormier of the 2 days. Moisture affecting coastal Georgia, the low country of South Carolina this morning. This is our area that we were watching in the tropics. Not really developing, but the moisture's still there. Florida's going to have a very unsettled day today again. Tomorrow we see somewhat quieter weather for this region, but still some storms popping up and moving up the Grand Strand into North Carolina. And we'll see more pop-ups as we start to get more unsettled here over northern Florida, Georgia, and southeast Alabama later in the day tomorrow. Here's the heat wave we're talking about. 106 in central Kansas, 102 in St. Louis today, 100 in Baltimore, and upper 90s in parts of southeastern Pennsylvania. Tomorrow, we are still going to be hot in southern New England and the Northeast, but cooler in northern New England. The Great Lakes cool off down to 80 in Chicago, 76 in Milwaukee, but it's still going to be very hot back across Kansas and Arkansas tomorrow, as well as across the Raleigh and Richmond corridor here of I-85. As we get to Sunday, it will start to cool down, though, in the Mid-Atlantic region, and certainly cooler across the Ohio Valley with those storms in the forecast here. Thank goodness. But it's only going to get so cool as we get down into Missouri and Kansas. The heat wave is still in place here on Monday, while the east is cooler. Tuesday will be below average for a change here in New England. Comfortable, I say comfortable, mid to upper 80s in the Mid-Atlantic region, and still very hot across Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. As we get to Wednesday, you can see that heat is starting to slowly build back to the north and east. It will not be extreme in Illinois just yet, but as we get to next Thursday and Friday, it should get pretty hot once again. Thank you all so much for your time today. Please be safe if you're in the areas under the gun over the next 48 to 60 hours. And if you did enjoy this video, please, I urge you to subscribe. And those of you that are subscribers, if you haven't become a member yet, you can. It's $9.99 a month, about 33 cents a day. Priority responses to your comments, tailored forecasts. And for those of you that are like me and maybe are believers, it's a place for us to kind of commune and get together and pray for each other as well. I give all the glory to God as I do every day. He gives me this gift as a meteorologist to share with you all and help you all be safe and plan ahead. He also has called me to share the good news, and that's the gospel, the grace of God, which is mentioned in the Bible 43 times, the grace of God. Romans 5:1-3. Therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom we also have access by faith into his grace, wherein we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. And not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience. Jesus is coming again, folks, and I would rather have hope and have joy knowing that that's happening and that we are going to be justified by faith, having that peace, knowing that that's coming, eternal life is coming to us, than to live the rest of my life, which is not a very long amount of time. I don't know if it's going to be 20, 30, 50, 60 years, but not living knowing that I have the grace of God is something that really freaks me out and scares me. So I made the choice 10 years ago to become a Christian, knowing that I can now trust in God and have hope and have faith and belief that what's been done for Jesus will be done for me, and that's living eternally. And I pray that's your situation as well, whatever you're going through. And if you're not a believer, look, I'm not trying to force it in your face. Yes, I'm sharing my beliefs because it's important. It's a testimony of that, how much my life has changed in 10 years and the peace that I now have that I did not have in my 20s and early 30s. But I just want you to see that, because that is the joy that's been given to me through God, knowing that Jesus is coming again. And I really pray that you have that joy as well. And if you do have the joy, but you're struggling, you're not alone. That's just here, me encouraging you, saying you're not alone, and that I would love to pray for you. So please, if you have a prayer request, do not be bashful. I'm happy to pray for you and anybody else important to you. Thank you all so much for your time today. I hope you have a blessed Friday, and another video coming tomorrow morning. Take care.